I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network. A federal judge in New York has denied Donald Trump's motion to dismiss the new claims that were brought by E. Jean Carroll. She filed a new lawsuit based on the Adult Survivors Act, a statute that took effect in New York on November 24th, 2022, which provides a one-year look-back period for victims of rape and sexual assault and other crimes relating to sexual abuse. So her claims from the mid-1990s were revived by this New York statute that took effect November 24th, 2022. Donald Trump, in his motion to dismiss, argued that this statute, which is called the Adult Survivors Act, he argued that it was unconstitutional and a violation of his due process rights and the due process rights of other perpetrators of sexual assault under the New York State Constitution. So that was the first grounds that Donald Trump moved for in his motion to dismiss. And the second new claim that E. Jean Carroll brought was a new claim for defamation. In her first lawsuit that she filed back in 2019, it was a claim for defamation that took place in 2019 while Donald Trump was still in office. But the new defamatory conduct occurred on October 12th, 2022, after E. Jean Carroll announced that she would be bringing a new lawsuit under the Adult Survivors Act. Donald Trump went on his social media platform and started to defame her and made a lot of the same defamatory statements that he made while he was in office. But unlike while he was in office, where he at least has an argument, I think one that was without merit, although it's still being decided by the Court of Appeals, that he had immunity while he was in office under a bunch of Federal Tort Claim Act statutes and sovereign immunity, which provides there's really no claim for defamation if a statement's being made by someone like the president, if that's determined to be in the course and scope of his employment, and if he's defined as an employee of the federal government, there is no claim for defamation allowed. So that's being litigated before the Court of Appeals, but Trump made the new statement on his social media platform on October 12th, so there's no argument at all for immunity. But Donald Trump moved to dismiss the new defamation claim based upon what he said on October 12th of 2022 on the grounds that the defamatory statements the claims for his defamatory statements do not allege special damages, which is also another way of saying economic damages, and just allege that E. Jean Carroll suffered emotional distress and other trauma. And Trump argued that she needed to allege special damages, but as the judge explained, and the judge schooled Donald Trump on the difference of libel and slander, both forms of defamation. But libel per se is written defamation. Slander is oral defamation. And in New York law, slander per se, oral defamation, actually requires that the individual who was injured by the slander per se suffered and pled economic injuries, which is a heightened standard above libel per se, where you don't have to allege these additional economic injuries in the complaint. You could just allege emotional distress and trauma, which are not special damages. Those are referred to as general damages. That's what emotional distress is referred to. And so the court, in this case, it was Judge Lewis Kaplan, is the federal judge in the Southern District of New York, said that Donald Trump's motion to dismiss on both claims totally and utterly lacks merit. With respect to Donald Trump's claim that the revival statute, that is the Adult Survivors Act, which revives statute of limitations from previous claims where the statute of limitations expired, Judge Kaplan ruled that that is not a violation of Donald Trump's due process rights or any of the due process rights of other individuals who perpetrated sexual assault in the past. I just want you to think about the argument, though, that Donald Trump made here. The way he was trying to get the case dismissed is to basically make this argument not just on his own behalf, but to try to help all of the other perpetrators of sexual assault and rape who can now be sued under the revival statute, the Adult Survivors Act, which came into effect November 4th of 2022, arguing it was a violation of his due process rights. And what the court explained, citing to the Court of Appeals in New York, which is the highest court, to determine whether a revival statute is unconstitutional under the New York due process clause in the New York Constitution, you have to ask whether the revival statute is, quote, is reasonably measured to address an injustice. That's the standard. It's a pretty simple standard. Is a revival statute reasonably measured to address an injustice? And Donald Trump argued that the Adult Survivors Act was not reasonably measured to address an injustice. And where do you look to determine if a law is reasonably measured to address an injustice? As Judge Lewis Kaplan said, well, you got to look to the statutory history, the statutory language, what was being discussed behind the passage of this law. So what was the legislature saying and what was the governor saying? And clearly here, this revival statute to help victims of sexual assault bring claims based on an unfair statute of limitations, which is in no way tailored to the type of trauma sexual assault and rape victims experience. Clearly, this is a statute that was reasonably measured to address injustice. So the court said, Donald Trump, your motion to dismiss on that count is denied. And E. Jean Carroll, you can now pursue a case against Donald Trump, not just for defamation, not just for Donald Trump accusing you of lying about being raped, but that you can now pursue your claim of defamation. Not just your claim for defamation. In addition to it, you could pursue your claim of sexual assault as well. Then the judge addressed the claim of E. Jean Carroll asserting the new defamation claim for Donald Trump's statements on October 12, 2022. Just to remind you what he said, it's very similar to what he said to the press when he was in office, but now he's not in office. And this is what Trump said, just to refresh your recollection. Trump said, this Miss Bergdorf-Goodman case is a complete con job in our legal system in the country, but especially in New York State. Just look at Peekaboo James. He uses that vile racist language, is a broken disgrace. You have to fight for years and spend a fortune in order to get your reputation back from liars, cheats, and hacks. I don't know this woman, have no idea who she is, other than it seems she got a picture of me many years ago with her husband shaking my hand on a reception line at a celebrity charity event. She completely made up the story that I met her at the doors of this crowded New York City department store. Within minutes, swooned her. It is a hoax and a lie, just like all the other hoaxes that have been played on for me for the past 7 years. And while I'm not supposed to say it, I will. This woman is not my type. She has no idea what day, what week, what month, what year, or what decade the so-called event supposedly took place. The reason she doesn't know is because it never happened, and she doesn't want to get caught up with the details or facts that can be proven wrong. If you watch Anderson Cooper's interview with her, where she was promoting a really crummy book, you will see that it is a complete scam. She changed her story from the beginning to the end after the commercial break to suit the purposes of CNN and Andy Cooper. Our justice system is broken along with almost everything else in our country. In the meantime, and for the record, E. Jean Carroll is not telling the truth, is a woman who I had nothing to do with, didn't know, and wouldn't have no interest in knowing her if I ever had the chance. Now all I have to do is go through years of legal nonsense in order to clear my name of her and her lawyer's phony attacks on me. This can only happen to Trump. So that was the statement that Trump put out on a social media company. She sued him for defamation based on that statement. And the court here found that that statement would constitute defamation. This case can go before a jury. Donald Trump's claim, again, as I mentioned earlier, was that she did not allege special damages, a type of damages, a form of damages, to support her defamation case. But the judge says this is not a slander case, not an oral defamation case. This is a libel. Donald Trump is a written defamation. He posted it on his social media platform and sent it to listserv. So written defamation, libel per se, just has a different standard. So the judge referred to these two claims, the October 12th, 2022 defamation and the November 24th, 2022 Adult Survivors Act revival of E. Jean Carroll's rape claim. So the rape claim and the October 12, 2022 defamatory conduct, this is all part of Carroll 2, it was called, which is the second lawsuit that E. Jean Carroll filed. Carroll won the first lawsuit that she filed, which is set to go to trial in April, by the way. And the judge seems inclined to having all of these cases go to trial in April. We will see about that. But he ruled relatively quickly on this motion to dismiss. But E. Jean Carroll 1, which was filed in 2019, was appealed to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals after Judge Lewis Kaplan found that Donald Trump should not have immunity. Lewis Kaplan found that Donald Trump should not fit the definition of what would constitute a federal employee under the Westfall Act, and that in any event, the conduct didn't occur within the course and scope of doing his duties as a federal employee, in this case being in the office of the presidency, because defaming people and slandering people and libeling people is not the conduct of a president. That was appealed to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, the federal circuit court that oversees the district court where Judge Lewis Kaplan sits. The Second Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that for purposes of the Westfall Act, that Lewis Kaplan, the federal judge, was wrong as it relates to whether or not Donald Trump is considered a federal employee. They said he was, but they then asked the question to the Washington, D.C. Court of Appeal, which is the district's top court, the top district court within the District of Columbia, for them to make a ruling on the course and scope issue, whether the statements made by Donald Trump in 2019 defaming E. Jean Carroll were within the course and scope of his duties. That oral argument was already held just very recently. We're waiting on a ruling there. But even if E. Jean Carroll 1 gets dismissed based on what the Court of Appeal and what the D.C. Court of Appeal and what the New York Second Circuit does, it doesn't matter, because Carroll 2, the new defamation action where Donald Trump said it after he was in office, so he has no immunity, and the fact that E. Jean Carroll can now bring the underlying rape case for her allegations that Trump raped her at the Bergdorf Goodman department store in 1995 or 1996, whereas that statute of limitations was extinguished. She could not bring the case because it was a 2-year statute of limitations. So after 1998, she couldn't bring any lawsuits for the underlying rape itself. But now with the Adult Survivors Act, she and other sexual assault victims in New York had this 1-year look back period. One thing I could just mention too, the work that I do as a lawyer outside of when I do these podcasts, I represent victims of sexual assault who have been sexually assaulted in corporate settings or by law enforcement or by in various settings as well. So if that issue, if you're living in New York, I don't practice in New York, but my law firm has an office in New York. And so whether we can do it or if I could refer you to another lawyer, if you reach out to me at ben@MeidasTouch.com, ben@MeidasTouch.com, if you are a sexual assault victim or know a sexual assault victim who is asking for help and has a story like this, if it's something I can't handle, I can try to refer it out to somewhere, but you could just send me an email, ben@MeidasTouch.com. In any event, I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network. Hit the subscribe button. We're on our way to 1 million subscribers thanks to your support. Also, check us out at patreon.com/MeidasTouch, patreon.com/MeidasTouch. We have lots of great exclusive content you can only get on our Patreon site, but most importantly, it helps grow this independent media platform. Until next time, I'm Ben Meiselas.
At MeidasTouch, we are unapologetically pro-democracy, and we demand justice and accountability. That's why we're spreading our message to Convict 45. That's right, gear up right now with your Convict 45 tees and pins at store.MeidasTouch.com. That's store.MeidasTouch.com.